Joints provide a weak-in plane that enables a crack to form in a controlled manner. In this lecture, we will learn developing a procedure for determining the appropriate saw cutting time window for typical pavements constructed. Concrete is saw cut in order to create control joints that will help control where cracking occurs due to shrinkage. The cuts should be made at a predetermined spacing and only after the concrete has obtained sufficient strength but before internal cracking begins. The goal of this activity is to reduce the risk of random cracking. The timing of saw cuts is critical. Determining when to make cuts depends on many factors, including the type of admixtures and aggregate used in the concrete, the air temperature, and the concrete's mix design. There are several types of saw blades that can be used, depending on the concrete type and how soon the cuts can be started. The factors that can lead to excessive blade wear are pushing the blade too hard in the concrete, saw cutting at high speed using an inappropriate saw blade. In addition to when concrete was casted, and the weather conditions, determining when to saw concrete is also based on the concrete's hardness as well as the type of cutting equipment used to make the saw cuts. Cutting too early causes raveling, an effect created by the saw blade pulling the aggregate out of position, leaving a messy, weakened edge along the cut. Sawing too late can result in uncontrolled cracking as the concrete contracts during curing. Saw cut spacing. Before you start saw cutting concrete, it is important to select where these cuts will be done, and this need to be confirmed by a structural engineer. Following points needs to be considered while designing the patterns of saw cut. Try to form square patterns for aesthetic look. Ensure saw cuts are continuous, across length and width of building. It is important to select an area that doesn't have continuous steel reinforcement. It is better to have smaller cracks than to have several joints. Saw cut spacing. In hot weather conditions, try forming a larger square and then cutting interior joints. By doing this, we can be controlling fast-setting concrete cracks in larger areas. Saw cut markings. Once you have received the drawings from structural consultant, mark them using a chalk line. After, allow the blade to reach the required depth, and move the equipment following the chalk-like mark. Recommendations when saw cutting the concrete. Allow the blade to reach the required depth, then start walking or moving the equipment following the chalk-like mark. Do not twist the saw blade. Do not let the blade spin in the cut, as this will increase wear on the bond. When cutting concrete with heavy rebar, use blades with soft metal segment bonds. Saw cutting depth. Ensure that the saw cut depth meets the structural engineering specifications. If the joint is too deep, aggregate interlocking will not be sufficient to transfer loads. If the saw cut is too shallow, random cracking might occur.